Lan makes landfall, Hurricane Fernanda peaks on tonight's tropical weather bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for August 15th. So the old guard are leaving us now in the Western Pacific with those two storms on a weakening trend, Lan and Dora, and the new arrivals, Greg in the Central Pacific and Hurricane Fernanda, which isn't as new but peaked earlier as a Category 4 hurricane and possibly another one on the way behind it. We're down to code yellow for the first time in 22 days. That's a record for the TCOS era, backdated now to 1970, believe it or not. In the Atlantic, two areas of interest now in the eastern part of the basin. We're watching both of them, but especially that second one to the east for the Cape Verde region could be something to look out for. Day 92 in the eastern Pacific, we've got Greg over there in the Central Pacific as mentioned, not affecting any land. Fernanda also moving out to sea, and that 90% chance there for a system expected to become a tropical cyclone within the next couple of days as it gradually moves northwestwards. Western Pacific, Lan made landfall earlier on. It was a slow mover and still is, possibly a big rain haul for that one. And Dora is clinging on to tropical storm status, might be about to lose it. It's looking very poor on satellite imagery, just a little bit of convection keeping it together. No areas of interest right now across the Indian region though. It's fairly quiet here, but a few monsoonal showers along the Malay Peninsula and in Sumatra, Indonesia. So let's take a look at Lan then right now. Here's its current position. There's still typhoon warnings in effect for large areas of central Honshu, Shizuoka westwards there, and it's currently 53 kilometers from Wakayama, 88 from Osaka, 95 from Kobe, 125 from Kyoto and 174 from Okayama. All of these locations are under some kind of warning right now. I think the typhoon warning extends to Okayama and gale advisories, as you saw in that text there, extending far beyond those areas. It's a wide storm, widespread impacts likely. Fernanda out to sea and obviously not affecting any land areas, so those distances are just for the sake of it really. It's 12:18 from Cabo San Lucas and moving away, 18:53 from San Diego, 1995 from Los Angeles, 38:12 from Hilo, Hawaii, and 41:16 from Honolulu. Peaked earlier on today, about 12 hours ago, as a 130 mile per hour Category 4. Now appears to be weakening, as you'll see on satellite in just a second. So let's first take a look at what Lan has done in the last few hours. Well, there it is in the process of making that landfall, and you can see it's enormous what's left of its eye there, a large area towards the center over Wakayama prefecture there in southern Honshu, Japan, and you can see a little bit more clearly there on the infrared viewer. Gradually moving northwestwards, looking very poor on the RAM enhancement there, with very few cloud tops extending into the -50s, -60s. Here's radar though showing that there are large amounts of rain falling over that area east of the storm center, and a big trailing line to its west there as well that you can see trailing along the interior region there over the hills. Now here is Fernanda earlier today looking impeccable, it has to be said, but it didn't maintain that presence for very long, and the eye is starting to disappear again, as you can see on this latest infrared imagery, as well as a weakness there in the western part of the eyewall, probably a dry air intrusion or at least an opening. Peaked earlier on, had pretty much that red ring. There's Dora, really struggling. Wake Island just to its southwest there, but all of the convection is to the northeast, away from the island. And here's Greg, a quick look at that one because we probably won't be able to fit it in much more tonight. There it is, gradually moving westwards, about 45 mile per hour winds. It's a fairly small storm, and of course it defied all of the Hone watchers out there because everyone was expecting it to get that name this morning, but it didn't. It got named Greg instead. Eastern Pacific sea surface temperatures still look good off the coast of Mexico out to a fair distance now. The Atlantic also looking very good, of course, and looking towards the eastern Atlantic there, it's still borderline around where those systems might develop, but between Cape Verde and Africa, it's looking good, 28 degrees Celsius there. Gulf of Mexico still piping hot, although not quite as much so in the western part of the Gulf, but very much so there in the east. Western Pacific also still looking decent, but you can clearly see a few of those gaps caused by recent storms with Canoon and then Lan, but still a few areas of very warm temperatures above 30 degrees extending from the Marianas through to the Philippines and on through the South China Sea. Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal looking okay, around Sri Lanka as well, warm temperatures, but the coast near West Bengal and Bangladesh, the warmest point, one of the warmest points actually, 28 to 29 degrees. Much cooler now in the southwest Indian Ocean off Madagascar, temperatures really going down in their winter down there. The Australian region as well, Gulf of Carpentaria barely holding on to any 26 degrees Celsius waters now, as is the Coral Sea, and Fiji just about to let go of its 26 degrees Celsius waters as well, near the coolest time of year down there in the southern hemisphere. Compared to average then, blue areas there are below average. You can see where those typhoons have tracked there, bringing the temperatures a little bit below average in the Westpac in a few spots, but a few areas a little bit above as well, but generally pretty average. Eastern Pacific is well above average in the eastern part of the basin. Further west, not so much, it's below. And in the Atlantic, it is generally above average there as well for large parts, if not the entirety of the basin, with a few spots, particularly in the Gulf and in the MDR, about 2 degrees, maybe 3 above. Here is the oceanic heat content, still an enormous amount of energy located in the Caribbean Sea extending into the Gulf and also near the Bahamas. Eastern Pacific also looking good in one or two patches to the south of Guerrero in Mexico and extending further along the coast as well into the Gulf of California. Western Pacific getting its mojo back near the Philippines and the southern Ryukyu Islands, which were decimated by recent typhoons as well. So here's the GFS model for the next 5 days, and it is the leading model depicting 2 systems now rather than 1. A couple of other models are sort of on board with that. 1 or 2 predict the western one will take precedence, and others have the eastern one, which is what the GFS is doing here. And you can see the western one struggles, the eastern one bends its track a little bit further towards the north through the northern islands of Cape Verde, and then becomes an interesting tropical storm. Having said that, those temperatures are quite low up there, so I'm not sure whether that is accurate. Eastern Pacific, looking at Fernanda moving off towards the west there, a fairly small storm by the way, and then look at the behemoth that forms behind it, an enormous hurricane that looks like it forms there in the Eastern Pacific and could give a run for its money for the Baja California Peninsula, and maybe 1 or 2 spots along the coast of Mexico as well in Colima, that region. Looks like there could be tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall that could affect land. That's within the next 5 days. I imagine they might put out tropical storm watches. There's Dora moving off towards the northeast and Lan, what's left of it. We didn't even have time to show Greg, by the way, but it dies off pretty quickly. Only gets a maximum wind of about 45-50 miles per hour. There's Lan moving off an ex-tropical cyclone there. Watch that landfall sequence again. It continues, moves northwards, still has a lot of strength about it as it hugs the coast of Russia, probably post-tropical by that point. And what's left of Dora continues up towards the northeast and really struggles as well. Gets absorbed into an extratropical low eventually. So looking at rainfall, this is the primary present concern that we've got right now for Japan and beyond. Even the coast of Russia there east of Vladivostok, which could get significant amounts of rainfall, but in Japan that's the primary area of concern, on top of what we've already seen there, which I imagine is already quite a lot with the threat of landslides. Another 8 inches possible there in large parts of eastern Shikoku and central southern Honshu, with maximums there getting up towards 9 inches. That's just shy of 250 millimeters, and even along the coast of Russia there, 6 inches, that's 150 millimeters. Hokkaido looks like it will get away without much rain, but they could get some strong winds, as of course could a lot of those areas along that northern side as well. Into the longer range then, day 5 to 10, and what happens in the Atlantic next? Well, both of those systems degenerate quite quickly, but behind that, maybe a third one on its way in that longer range period. There's a system starting to develop, and there it is on the 24th, 25th that really starts to get its act together right near the end of that 10-day period. Obviously can't be very sure about that one at all just yet, but there it is. Nonetheless, interesting to watch and see how all of this situation unfolds with those 3 potential systems in that 10-day period. Looking at that massive hurricane there grazing the Baja California Peninsula, and a bit more than that actually, hurricane force winds nearing the coast and then moving up, making a run for California, which is interesting. Post-tropical by the time it makes its closest approach, but gale force winds could occur along the coast there from San Diego, maybe even up to LA, and definitely the Channel Islands there. And then that next system looks like another system might form over there as well towards the end of that 10-day period. Western Pacific during that same time as well gets very sloppy and messy. A very broad system there approaching the coast of Japan and strikes Shikoku once again, moving up towards the north. And then another system behind that as well by the time we get to the 25th. No clear-cut indications that those would become tropical cyclones, whether they'll reach the threshold criteria. But 2 low-pressure systems to watch and could exacerbate rainfall issues that might occur from Lan. As all the serious stuff, you can take a look at the Force 13 merch store by scanning that barcode on the top right hand side. It'll take you straight there. You can take a look at all of our usual items, including our full season individual storm animations, and our still waiting for Hone t-shirt, which are still going out there. They didn't get pulled because we didn't get a Hone. Oh dear. In the Scilly range then, that system becomes quite potent there in the main development region of the Atlantic, but it doesn't reach the other side of its crossing. And then another system forming there in the Bay of Campeche towards the end of that period there, around about the 29th, 30th of August, which is interesting. First of all, looking at that system that almost gets towards hurricane status in the central Atlantic, gradually moving westwards, maybe west-northwest, but struggles later on by the looks of things. And then that second system in the southern Gulf of Mexico, moving towards the northwest, so that could make a run for Texas, but that's obviously way out in that range. Very large Western Pacific system continuing there and developing in the end near Okinawa, and then another system in the South China Sea that goes on to affect the southern coast of China, Hainan, and then into northern Vietnam, almost reaches typhoon status. The other one, the first one there, that strengthens quite quickly near Okinawa, gives it a real surprise there, just off the coast as a Category 1 typhoon, and then it slides up towards the northeast and really goes for Kyushu again. So these same areas being affected, if that is to be believed. Force 13's 2023 Eastern Tour commences in September. I'll be at these locations. If you want to hang with us or arrange anything, you can always do that by sending us a message if you're in those areas when we are. You can also chat on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13, for tropical weather and general weather chat from around the world with our 3,500 members from everywhere. Well, on this day, a beautiful image, a rare image from inside the eye of Typhoon March in 1951. August the 15th is when it peaked at probably 185 miles per hour and a pressure of 886 millibars. I could go into the specifics on that, but it will take a while. Not enough time. Charlie was a tropical storm, would eventually become a very powerful hurricane in the Caribbean and really go on to slam the Yucatan Peninsula. We also had a tropical depression unnumbered in the Western Pacific near China, and tropical depression 8B, which would strike West Bengal in the next couple of days. Back to today, and a long time ago that was. Atlantic, the next name is Emily. In the Eastern Pacific, we've gone through a few now, and the next name is Hillary. And in the Central Pacific, of course, it is still Hone. Sorry, Hone fans, it's just not happening for you this year so far. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Saola, and in the North Indian Ocean, our next name on the list there is Tej. Still no sign of that one yet. So 38 storms so far this year. The average per year is 92. In the Australian region, the next name is Jasper. Southwest Indian Ocean, Alvaro is the first name, and in the South Pacific next up is Lola. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.